Gregory Hartford's home office was a shrine to his daughter's medical history. Filing cabinets lined one wall, each drawer labeled with years and specialists. 8 years of documentation, 8 years of hope and disappointment, meticulously preserved, like evidence for a trial that never came. Maya had woken Gregory, explained the situation. Penelope's pain, Dr. Montgomery's dismissal, the mass she'd felt. To his credit, Gregory hadn't questioned her. He'd simply unlocked his office and told her to find whatever she needed. Now, at 5 a.m., Maya was surrounded by files, reading through surgical notes and specialist reports by lamplight. It took her 3 hours to find it, buried in a folder from 6 years ago, in surgical notes that should have been reviewed by every doctor who treated Penelope afterward. The report from Dr. Lawrence Walsh, the surgeon who'd removed Penelope's spinal hardware when she was 2 years old. Maya read the document once, twice, 3 times, her hands shaking harder with each pass. Surgical procedure, hardware removal patient. Penelope Hartford, age 2. Date, 6 years prior. Procedure successful in removing primary stabilization rods. 2. Anchor plates 1, 2, and 3 successfully extracted without complication. Plate 4, lower lumbar, L2-L3 junction, embedded in excessive scar tissue. Multiple attempts at extraction resulted in concerning neural response. Decision made to abort extraction of 4th plate to prevent potential nerve damage. Recommendation: follow-up removal of 4th anchor plate within 6 months once inflammation reduces. Monitor for migration or infection. Schedule follow-up with pediatric neurosurgeon. At the bottom, in different handwriting, a note. Patient's father verbally informed of retained hardware and need for follow-up. Written report to be mailed to residents. Maya stood up so fast, her chair tipped over. She ran to Gregory's bedroom and knocked hard on the door. "Mr. Hartford, we need to talk, right now." 5 minutes later, Gregory was sitting in his office, staring at the surgical report like it was written in a language he couldn't understand. "This is impossible," he said, his voice hollow. "I was never told there was retained hardware. Dr. Walsh called me after the surgery. He said everything went perfectly, that all the hardware was out, that Penelope could start healing." "Did you ever receive the written report?" Maya asked. Gregory's face went pale. No, I was moving us to this house around that time. It was 6 months after Jessica died. Everything was chaos. I assumed all the medical records transferred to Dr. Montgomery when he took over Penelope's care. Maya pulled another file. "These are Dr. Montgomery's intake notes from when he became Penelope's primary physician. Look at what he wrote." Gregory read aloud. "Previous spinal hardware successfully removed per Dr. Walsh. Patient presents with complete paraplegia secondary to birth trauma. No further surgical interventions recommended." "There's no mention of retained hardware," Maya said. "Dr. Montgomery assumed the surgery was complete. He's been treating Penelope for 6 years without ever knowing that there's a piece of metal in her spine that was supposed to come out." Gregory stood up abruptly, his hands shaking. "Are you telling me that my daughter has had a piece of metal embedded in her spine for 6 years, that Dr. Walsh knew it was there, never followed up, and Dr. Montgomery never checked?" "I'm telling you," Maya said carefully, "that Penelope has a mass at the exact location where that 4th anchor plate was supposed to be, and her symptoms, the fever that's not responding to antibiotics, the pain where she shouldn't have sensation, are consistent with hardware infection or migration." "Migration?" Gregory's voice cracked. "What does that mean?" "It means that over 6 years, as Penelope grew, that anchor plate might have moved, might have embedded deeper into tissue, might be pressing on nerves that... Maya paused, almost afraid to say it. That might not be dead. The room went silent. Mr. Hartford, I need you to call Dr. Montgomery right now and demand imaging. Immediately. Today. Not in a few days, not after the antibiotics run their course. Today. Gregory was already reaching for his phone. Dr. Montgomery was, predictably, resistant. Mr. Hartford, I understand you're concerned, but Ms. Richardson is not qualified to make these kinds of assessments. Phantom pain is extremely common in paralysis patients. What she felt during her examination was likely just scar tissue or natural spinal irregularities. I can assure you there's no retained hardware. I've been managing Penelope's care for 6 years. I would know. Gregory's voice was cold. Dr. Montgomery, have you ever actually looked at the surgical notes from Penelope's hardware removal when she was 2? A pause. I reviewed Dr. Walsh's summary when I took over Penelope's care. Did you read the actual surgical report? Mr. Hartford, Dr. Walsh is one of the most respected pediatric surgeons in the country. His summary clearly stated that the hardware was removed successfully. His summary was wrong. Gregory's voice was shaking now, with rage, with fear, with years of trust being shattered. I'm looking at the actual surgical report right now. It states clearly that the 4th anchor plate could not be safely extracted, that it was left in place with recommendations for follow-up removal within 6 months. Did you know about this? Silence on the other end of the line. Dr. Montgomery, did you know my daughter had retained hardware? That's not possible. I would have been informed. Dr. Walsh would have... I'm emailing you the surgical report right now. You'll have it in 30 seconds, and then you're going to order immediate imaging for my daughter, not next week, not when you have an opening, today, or I'm taking her to another hospital, and you'll be hearing from my lawyers. Mr. Hartford, I really don't think... Today, Dr. Montgomery, CT scan, MRI, whatever imaging you need to confirm or deny what Ms. Richardson found. Because if she's right, if there's been hardware in my daughter's spine for 6 years that should have been removed, if you've been treating her without ever checking the original surgical documentation. Gregory's voice dropped to something dangerous. Then we have a very serious problem. Another long pause. Then reluctantly, I'll make some calls. Meet me at Connecticut Children's Hospital in 3 hours. The line went dead. Gregory turned to Maya, his face gray. If you're wrong about this... I'm not wrong, Maya said. Mr. Hartford, I felt it. There's something there that shouldn't be. And whether it's that anchor plate or something else, Penelope needs to be looked at by someone who's actually willing to see her. But 3 hours later, standing in the hospital waiting for Dr. Montgomery, Maya made a different decision. She looked at Gregory, at Penelope dozing feverishly in her wheelchair, at the gleaming hospital that represented the same system that had missed Timothy's condition. Mr. Hartford, she said quietly, I don't trust Dr. Montgomery to look objectively. His reputation is on the line. If he missed this for 6 years, if he never reviewed the original surgical notes, he has every reason to dismiss my findings. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we go somewhere else. Somewhere Dr. Montgomery has no influence. Somewhere no one knows Penelope's history. Somewhere they'll look at her with fresh eyes. Gregory stared at her. You want me to walk away from the doctor who's been treating my daughter for 6 years? I want you to get your daughter the care she deserves from someone who doesn't have a vested interest in being right. It was the moment that would determine everything. Trust the system that had failed Penelope for 8 years, or trust a caregiver who'd been there for 4 weeks. Gregory looked at his daughter, at her fevered face, at the pain she was enduring. "Where?" he asked. "Boston Children's Hospital, 2 hours away. One of the best pediatric emergency rooms in the country. No connection to any of Penelope's previous doctors." Gregory pulled out his phone and called his driver. "Get the car ready, we're going to Boston, now." The pediatric emergency room at Boston Children's Hospital was bustling with the organized chaos of Sunday morning. Parents with sick children, nurses moving efficiently between beds, the constant beeping of monitors. Maya approached the triage nurse with Penelope in her wheelchair, Gregory right behind them. "My name is Maya Richardson. I'm the caregiver for this patient, Penelope Hartford. She's 8 years old, with a history of complete paraplegia from birth. She's presenting with a fever of 102.8 that's not responding to antibiotics and localized pain at the L2-L3 junction. I believe she has retained spinal hardware from a surgery 6 years ago that's now infected and possibly migrated. She needs immediate imaging." The nurse looked skeptical. "Retained hardware for 6 years. That would have been found in routine care, wouldn't it?" "It should have been," Maya said firmly. "It wasn't. Please just look. Do a CT scan. If I'm wrong, we'll apologize and go home. But if I'm right..." She looked at Penelope, at the little girl who was depending on her. "If I'm right, every hour we wait is making it worse." Something in Maya's voice, the urgency, the certainty, the desperate advocacy, made the nurse pause. "Let me get the attending." Dr. Sarah Kim was young, maybe 35, with kind eyes and the kind of efficiency that came from training at a top-tier hospital. She listened to Maya's entire explanation without interrupting, reviewed the surgical notes that Gregory had brought, examined Penelope carefully. "I'm not going to lie to you," Dr. Kim said. "This is highly unusual. Retained hardware for 6 years should have been found. But your symptoms don't match your diagnosis, Penelope. You shouldn't be feeling pain where you're feeling it. So let's figure out what's actually going on. We'll do a CT scan first. It's faster. If we see something concerning, we'll follow up with an MRI." Penelope looked up at Maya. "Will you come with me?" "Every step of the way, sweetheart. I'm not leaving you." The CT scan took 30 minutes. Dr. Kim looked at the results for less than 10 seconds before she was making urgent phone calls. Maya knew that look. She'd seen it before, with Timothy. When the doctors finally realized how serious it was, the look that said, "We should have caught this sooner." Dr. Kim pulled Gregory and Maya into a consultation room. Through the window, they could see Penelope being moved to a more private area, nurses surrounding her with the kind of careful attention that meant something bad was happening. "Mr. Hartford, Ms. Richardson," Dr. Kim pulled up the CT images on a computer screen. "You were right. There is retained hardware." She pointed to a small, bright white shape on the scan. "This is an anchor plate. It's approximately 1 inch in diameter. According to these images, it's been there for years. You can see the tissue formation around it, the way it's embedded. But here's what's concerning." She zoomed in. "Over time, the plate has migrated. Children's spines grow and change. And apparently, this plate moved with that growth. It's now positioned directly against this nerve bundle." She pointed to shadowy shapes around the plate. "And it's infected, severely. You can see the inflammation, the fluid buildup. The infection is what's causing the fever and the pain. Can you remove it?" Gregory's voice was barely a whisper. "We have to remove it. The infection alone is dangerous. If left untreated, it could spread." "But Mr. Hartford..." Dr. Kim paused, choosing her words carefully. "The plate's current position is compressing nerve roots that control motor function to the lower extremities. What does that mean? Gregory asked, but Maya already knew. She could see it in Dr. Kim's face. It means, Dr. Kim said slowly, that we need to reassess Penelope's original diagnosis. Your daughter was diagnosed with complete paraplegia from birth trauma. But if this hardware has been compressing viable nerve tissue for years, she let that hang in the air. Are you saying she might not have permanent nerve damage? Gregory's voice broke. Are you saying she might be able to walk? I'm saying I don't know, Dr. Kim said honestly. The damage from 8 years of compression could be irreversible. The nerve pathways might be too degraded to recover. But Mr. Hartford, there's a possibility, I can't tell you how big or small, that removing this compression could restore some function. I need to call our top pediatric neurosurgeon, Dr. Jennifer Okoye. She's one of the best in the country. If anyone can do this safely, it's her. How soon? Maya asked. She's being paged now. If she's available, we operate within the hour. This infection can't wait. Gregory looked at Maya, his eyes filled with tears. You saved her. You saved my daughter. I haven't saved her yet, Maya said. We still have a long way to go. Dr. Jennifer Okoye arrived 45 minutes later, a tall woman in her 50s, with steady hands and the kind of calm authority that made you trust her immediately. She reviewed the CT scans, examined Penelope, asked a series of precise questions. Then she sat down with Gregory, Maya, and Penelope, because she insisted that Penelope, even at 8 years old, deserved to understand what was happening to her body. Penelope, Dr. Okoye said gently, there's a piece of metal in your back that wasn't supposed to stay there. It's making you sick, and we need to take it out. The surgery is delicate because it's very close to important nerves. But I've done this kind of surgery many times. I'm going to be very, very careful. Will it hurt? Penelope asked in a small voice. During the surgery, you'll be asleep, so you won't feel anything. After, you'll be sore, but we'll give you medicine to help with pain. The hard part is that we don't know what happens after we take the metal out. What do you mean? Dr. Okoye looked at Gregory, who nodded permission to be honest. That piece of metal has been pressing on some nerves in your back. Nerves that help your legs move. Now, those nerves might be damaged from being pressed on for so long, but there's also a chance, and I want to be clear that it's only a chance, that once we take the pressure away, those nerves might start working again. Penelope's eyes went wide. You mean I might be able to walk? I mean, we don't know, honey. The nerves might be too damaged. It's been 8 years. That's a very long time. But removing this metal gives you the best chance possible. Penelope looked at her father, then at Maya. What if I go through the surgery and nothing changes? What if I'm still in my wheelchair? Maya took Penelope's hand. Then you're still the smartest, bravest, most creative 8-year-old I know. Your worth doesn't depend on whether you can walk. It never has. But what if I want to walk? Penelope's voice cracked. Am I bad for wanting to be different? No, sweetheart, Maya said, her own voice thick with emotion. You're human. You can accept yourself exactly as you are and still hope for more. Those aren't opposites. That's just being alive. Penelope nodded slowly, processing. Then she looked at Dr. Okoye. Okay, do the surgery. I want to know the truth about my body. You're very brave, Dr. Okoye said. Miss Maya says, being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means doing the right thing even when you're scared. Penelope looked at Maya. You'll be here when I wake up? I promise, Maya said. I'm not going anywhere. If you've stayed with us this far, if Penelope's story is touching your heart, I need you to do something right now. Hit that like button. Not for me, for every child whose pain has been dismissed. For every caregiver who's been told they're overstepping when they're actually advocating. Drop a comment telling me, have you ever had to fight for yourself or someone you love when the experts wouldn't listen? Share your story. Let's build a community where no one suffers in silence. And subscribe, because next week I'm bringing you another story about ordinary people doing extraordinary things when the system fails. We're building something important here. Be part of it. The surgery took 5.5 hours. Gregory paced the surgical waiting room like a caged animal, making phone calls to lawyers, to medical boards, already building cases against Dr. Montgomery and Dr. Walsh, already preparing for the legal battle that would come after this. The accountability that both doctors had avoided for years. Maya sat with Penelope's favorite stuffed rabbit, a worn purple bunny named Hopscotch, in her lap. She didn't pray out loud, but she made promises to Timothy in her head. I found her. I didn't let her become invisible. I kept my promise to you. When Dr. Okoye finally emerged, her scrubs were marked with blood, but her face showed cautious relief. The hardware is out, she said, without preamble. The infection has been debrided and treated. The surgery went as well as we could have hoped. Gregory exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for hours. And the nerves? Dr. Okoye's expression became more guarded. There was significant scarring around the nerve bundle, compression damage that's been building for years. Mr. Hartford, Ms. Richardson, I need you to understand something. Even if there are viable nerve cells, we're talking about 8 years of unused neural pathways, 8 years of muscles that haven't received signals, 8 years of a brain that's adapted to paralysis. But is it possible? Gregory pressed. Is there any chance? In theory, if there are viable nerves and if we start immediate, intensive rehabilitation, there's a possibility of some functional recovery. But I want to be very clear. Recovery, if it happens at all, would be measured in months and years, not days and weeks, and it would likely be incomplete. We're not talking about a miracle cure. Can we see her? Maya asked. She's in recovery. She's already asking for both of you. Penelope looked tiny in the hospital bed, surrounded by monitors and IV lines, a bandage wrapped around her lower back. Her eyes were red-rimmed from crying, from fear, from anesthesia. Miss Maya, she whispered when they entered, my legs still don't work. I still can't feel them. I still can't move them. Maya sat carefully on the edge of the bed, taking Penelope's small hand. Sweetheart, even if the nerves can wake up, they've been asleep for 8 years. That's a long time. They need time to remember how to work. What if they never remember? What if I got my hopes up for nothing? Then you're still you, Maya said firmly. Still brilliant, still creative, still the girl who builds entire worlds in her notebooks, still the bravest person I know. Your value doesn't change based on what your legs can do. Tears slid down Penelope's face. But I want to walk so badly. Does that make me ungrateful? Does that make me a bad person for not accepting myself? No, honey. It makes you human. Maya brushed tears from Penelope's cheek. You can be grateful for who you are right now and still hope for something different. You can accept your reality and still fight to change it. Those aren't contradictions. That's just being alive and complicated and human. Gregory moved to the other side of the bed, taking Penelope's other hand. Whatever happens, sweetheart, we're okay. We're a family. That's what matters. Promise me you won't send Miss Maya away, Penelope said suddenly, urgently. Even if I'm difficult, even if nothing gets better, even if I'm in my wheelchair forever, promise me She can stay. I promise, Gregory said, his voice thick. Penelope looked at Maya. You won't leave, right? Even if I don't walk. Sweetheart, Maya said, squeezing her hand gently, I'm not here because of what you might become. I'm here because of who you are right now. You're stuck with me. For the first time since the surgery, Penelope smiled. What came next was a battle that played out in medical boards, courtrooms, and eventually national news. Gregory Hartford didn't just sue Dr. Montgomery and Dr. Walsh. He systematically exposed every failure, every oversight, every moment where professional ego had been prioritized over patient care. The investigation revealed that Dr. Walsh had retired with a pristine reputation, despite having a documented pattern of incomplete surgical notes. That he'd performed Penelope's hardware removal at age 72, near the end of his career, when his attention to detail had begun to slip. That he'd told Gregory verbally that everything went perfectly, but the written report, the one Gregory never received during the chaos of moving and grieving his wife, told a different story. Dr. Montgomery's failure was different, but equally damaging. He'd managed Penelope's care for 6 years without ever reviewing the original surgical documentation. He'd accepted Dr. Walsh's summary without question, had treated symptoms without investigating causes, had dismissed Penelope's pain as psychological without considering physical explanations. The medical board investigation found 9 other cases where Dr. Montgomery had failed to review complete medical histories before accepting previous diagnoses. 9 other families who'd trusted a doctor more interested in managing conditions than understanding them. Both doctors lost their licenses, both faced malpractice lawsuits, and both became examples of what happens when the medical system protects reputation over patients. But Gregory didn't stop there. He held a press conference that went viral. A billionaire father standing next to his daughter's wheelchair, his voice shaking with controlled fury. My daughter spent 8 years in a wheelchair because medical professionals failed to follow up on documented complications. She would still be suffering if her caregiver, a woman with no medical degree, a woman these doctors dismissed as overstepping, hadn't cared enough to actually examine her, to actually listen to her, to actually see her as a human being deserving of thorough care. He gestured to Maya, who stood uncomfortably in borrowed professional clothes, hating the spotlight, but understanding its necessity. Maya Richardson did what every medical professional should do, but somehow didn't. She listened to my daughter. She observed carefully. She questioned assumptions. And she advocated when advocacy was uncomfortable, inconvenient, and risky to her own career. A reporter shouted a question. Ms. Richardson, some in the medical community are saying you practiced medicine without a license, that you overstepped your professional boundaries. Maya had prepared for this question. She'd rehearsed it with lawyers, but in the moment, she spoke from her heart instead. My job is to care for Penelope, not to protect doctors' egos, not to respect hierarchy for its own sake, not to stay quiet when a child is suffering just because I don't have the letters MD after my name. She paused, meeting the camera directly. When a child tells you they're in pain, and the experts aren't listening, someone has to advocate. That's not overstepping. That's basic human decency. And if the medical system is more offended by advocacy than by their own failures, then the system is broken and needs to change. The clip played on every major news network for a week. 2 months after surgery, Penelope began intensive physical therapy. It was brutal, frustrating work. Most days, nothing happened. Her legs lay motionless on the therapy table, despite every attempt at movement. despite electrical stimulation, despite hours of effort. Maya was there for every session, not as medical staff, but as the person Penelope trusted most in the world. Maybe they were all right, Penelope said, during a particularly discouraging session, tears of frustration streaming down her face. Maybe the damage was always permanent. Maybe I got my hopes up for nothing. Maybe, Maya agreed, because she'd learned that false optimism helped no one. Or maybe recovery takes longer than 2 months, after 8 years of compression. We don't know yet. And not knowing is okay. You're supposed to tell me not to give up, Penelope said. I'm not telling you to give up. I'm telling you that progress isn't always visible, that nerves heal slowly, that hope doesn't have to look like constant improvement. It can look like just showing up and trying again tomorrow. Penelope managed a weak smile. You're not allowed to be wise and comforting. That's not in your job description. Too bad. You're stuck with me being both. On day 83 post-surgery, during a routine physical therapy session, something happened. Penelope was exhausted, ready to be done for the day. The physical therapist was preparing to help her transfer back to her wheelchair when Penelope shifted her weight slightly, and her left toe twitched, just once, barely visible. A movement so small, it could have been imagined. But 3 people saw it. The physical therapist saw it, Maya saw it, and Penelope felt it. Did I just? Penelope's voice was breathless, afraid to hope. Did my toe just move? Miss Maya, did you see that? The physical therapist was already repositioning, her professional excitement carefully controlled. Penelope, try again. Think about moving your left foot. Really focus on it. Nothing happened. They tried for another hour. Penelope concentrated so hard her face turned red, tears of frustration and hope mixing on her cheeks. But her toe stayed still. Sometimes, the therapist said gently, the first movements are involuntary. The nerves firing randomly as they wake up. It might not happen again for days or weeks. But it happened, Penelope whispered. It happened once. That means the nerves aren't dead. They're just sleeping. Maya knelt beside the therapy table, taking Penelope's hand. Yes, sweetheart, they're waking up, slowly, but they're waking up. That night, Penelope cried herself to sleep, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming weight of possibility. Recovery was measured in millimeters over months. A toe twitch became occasional foot movement by month 4. Foot movement became ankle flexion by month 6. By month 8, Penelope could bend her knee slightly with assistance, her face scrunched in concentration, her entire body shaking with effort. Each milestone was celebrated and documented. Each small victory was hard-won through hours of painful, frustrating therapy. There were setbacks, days when nothing worked, when Penelope was convinced she'd imagined all progress, when she wanted to quit. But Maya was there. Every session, every breakdown, every tiny triumph. Tell me about Timothy, Penelope said, one afternoon during a break between exercises. What was he like? Maya smiled, the grief of 15 years softening into something gentler. He was stubborn, like you. He hated pity, like you. And he made me promise that if I ever met another kid who was hurting and nobody was listening, I would listen. I would fight. I wouldn't let them become invisible. I'm glad he made you promise that, Penelope said, quietly. Because you kept it, and because you did, I'm here. I'm awake in my body, in ways I've never been before. He would have loved you, Maya said. I wish I could have met him. Sweetheart, in a way, you have. Every time I advocated for you, every time I refused to accept impossible, Every time I fought when it would have been easier to stay quiet, that was Timothy too. That was his promise, living on. Month 12 arrived with a moment that would change everything. Penelope stood, for the first time in her entire life. She was in the therapy room, hands gripping parallel bars so tightly her knuckles were white. 2 physical therapists supported her on either side, ready to catch her if she fell. Her legs were shaking so hard, it looked like they might give out at any second. But she was standing, supporting her own weight. Vertical. "Miss Meyer," Penelope's voice was thick with tears. "Miss Meyer, I'm standing. I'm actually standing." Meyer watched from across the room, her own tears falling freely. She didn't trust herself to speak, so she just nodded, her hand over her mouth. "Look at me, Daddy," Penelope called out. Gregory had rushed from work the moment Meyer texted him, and he stood in the doorway, openly weeping. "I see you, sweetheart," he managed. "I see you." Penelope stood for 47 seconds before her legs gave out, and the therapist lowered her carefully back into her wheelchair. 47 seconds. Not even a full minute, but it was everything. Month 18 brought the moment Meyer had been dreaming of since she'd first found that corroded piece of metal. Penelope took her first step, one small, shaking, imperfect step between the parallel bars before collapsing back into her wheelchair, laughing and crying simultaneously. "That was the hardest thing I've ever done," she gasped. "It was also the most beautiful," Meyer said. 2 years after surgery, Penelope's life looked different than anyone had imagined. She never walked without assistance. Even at her best, she used a walker for short distances and relied on her wheelchair for anything requiring endurance. Some days were better than others. Some days, her legs worked well enough to walk through her house, to navigate short distances. Other days, the fatigue was too much and the wheelchair was necessary. She would never run, never dance, never do the things that able-bodied people took for granted. But she walked through gardens for the first time, feeling grass under her feet, feeling the earth solid beneath her. She walked slowly, carefully, up 3 stairs to visit a friend's house, gripping the railing and Meyer's arm, her face fierce with concentration. She walked across the graduation stage when she finished elementary school, the entire auditorium on its feet, cheering for the little girl who'd been told she'd never take a single step. The fantasy worlds in her notebooks evolved into real architectural plans. Buildings designed with radical accessibility, features built into every element. Not accommodations added as afterthoughts, but spaces where disability was foundational to the design. Where wheelchair users and walkers moved through space with equal ease and dignity. At 11 years old, Penelope had already consulted on 2 major building projects, her unique perspective transforming how architects thought about accessible design. "I don't want to design buildings for disabled people," she explained to a journalist who interviewed her. "I want to design buildings for people, all people, because everyone deserves spaces that work for their bodies, not spaces that make them struggle." Gregory established the Timothy and Penelope Foundation for Pediatric Medical Advocacy, named after the brother Meyer lost and the daughter she saved. The foundation trained healthcare providers in thorough physical examination, in questioning established diagnoses, in listening to patients, especially young patients whose voices were easiest to dismiss. It provided free, comprehensive evaluations for families who couldn't afford specialists. It advocated for systemic changes in how medical records were transferred and reviewed. In 3 years, the foundation helped 147 children whose conditions had been misdiagnosed or whose care had been inadequate. 12 of those children had similar stories to Penelope's: retained hardware, missed complications, dismissive doctors who'd stopped actually looking. All 12 were now receiving proper treatment. The foundation also provided grants to caregivers, the nannies, aides, family members who noticed what doctors missed. The people society dismissed as not medical professionals, but who often knew their patients more intimately than any specialist. Maya became the foundation's executive director, her overstepping now celebrated as exactly the kind of advocacy the medical system desperately needed. 3 years after Maya first walked into the Hartford mansion, she and Penelope sat in the garden on a warm summer evening, watching fireflies dance in the twilight. Penelope was in her wheelchair. She'd walked that morning during therapy, but was saving energy for a friend's birthday party later. At 11, she'd learned to navigate both modes of mobility without shame, without feeling like using her wheelchair was a failure. "Miss Maya," Penelope said, watching the fireflies with that same wonder she'd had as a child. "Yes, sweetheart. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't found it? If you'd just accepted what Dr. Montgomery said?" Maya was quiet for a moment, honest as she'd always been with Penelope. "Every day, I wonder if I pushed too hard, if I caused you pain for nothing, if my guilt about Timothy made me reckless with your body." Penelope reached over and took Maya's hand, her grip strong now from years of physical therapy. "You didn't fail Timothy. The system failed him, just like it failed me. But you fought for me when nobody else would. That's not reckless. That's love." Maya squeezed her hand, her throat tight. "You know what Timothy made me promise?" Maya asked. "What?" "That if I ever met another kid who was hurting and nobody was listening, I would listen. I would fight. I wouldn't let them become invisible." Maya looked at Penelope fully. "You kept me honest to that promise. You reminded me why I do this work, why I refuse to stay quiet even when it costs me." Penelope smiled, that brilliant smile that had become easier over the years. "Then you kept your promise to Timothy. And because you did, hundreds of other kids won't have to suffer like we did." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fireflies dance, two people who'd saved each other in different ways. "Miss Maya?" Penelope said, after a while. "Yes. Thank you for seeing me. Not just the wheelchair, not just the diagnosis, not just the problem to solve. Thank you for seeing me." "Always, sweetheart," Maya said. "Always. Sometimes the greatest medical breakthroughs don't come from laboratories or prestigious research hospitals. Sometimes they come from someone who cares enough to truly look, to truly listen, to truly fight for the person in front of them, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's risky, even when everyone tells them to stay in their lane." This story is dedicated to every child whose pain was dismissed, whose voice was ignored, whose body was managed instead of healed. To every Timothy who didn't get a second chance. To every Penelope who almost didn't either. And to every caregiver, every aide, every nanny, every family member who refused to accept permanent as never try again. Who refused to let someone they loved become invisible. Who fought when fighting was hard. Who advocated when advocacy was costly. Who loved when love meant risking everything. You are the real heroes, not the specialists with prestigious degrees, not the doctors with the fancy titles, but the people who show up, who pay attention, who refuse to look away from suffering just because it's inconvenient or uncomfortable or challenges the established order. The medical system changed because of Penelope's case. New protocols were established. Records review became mandatory. Patient advocates became standard in pediatric care. 8 states passed laws requiring thorough physical examinations before accepting previous diagnoses. But more importantly, hundreds of families learned that they could question, could push back, could demand better care for their children. That doctor's orders wasn't the final word, that their instincts mattered, that their voices deserved to be heard. If this story moved you, if it reminded you why advocacy matters, if it made you think about someone in your life who needs their own Maya, someone who will see them, fight for them, refuse to let them become invisible, then I need you to do something right now. First, smash that subscribe button. Second, drop a comment right now. Tell me about a time you had to fight for yourself or someone you love when the experts wouldn't listen. Third, share this video. Not for me, for the parents sitting in a doctor's office right now being told their child's condition is permanent when nobody's actually looked closely. Medical neglect in pediatric care is real and ongoing. If you're a parent or caregiver of a child with complex medical needs, trust your instincts. You know your child better than any specialist who sees them for 20 minutes every 6 months. Question diagnoses, demand thorough examinations. Don't let anyone dismiss your concerns just because they have more letters after their name. I'm VickyTale, and I'll see you next week with another story that matters. Until then, keep fighting, keep advocating, keep refusing to let the people you love become invisible. Because sometimes saving a life starts with just one person who refuses to look away.